Welcome to Crime Most French, a fortnightly podcast covering intriguing cases carried out on French soil. Researched and narrated by Cedric and rudely interrupted by me, Melanie. We're the true crime podcast All the Lions. Crack open le vin and let the mayhem commence.
This is episode 59, The Perseverance of a Mother and a Bit of Luck. On the 7th of December 1987, Evelyne Boucher disappears. She is found dead the next day in a clearing, shot in the head execution style. It will take 20 years to solve the crime.
So, we're talking about 5 years ago.
1987.
87, oh God. Showing my age. Oh, surely that was 5 years ago.
Yes.
So it was mid-noughties, the...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on the 7th of December 1987, Evelyne Boucher, 16 years old, doesn't go to school. She decides instead to go to a cafe in Avignon, nearby, where she's used to spend her time.
She should be really spending it at school.
Yeah, but she's in what's called seconde here, so it's the year before the baccalaureate. No, 2 years before baccalaureate. And it's very common for kids who have been to primary school all their life to suddenly have some freedom, and then they start spending their days in cafes and stuff. I've seen it a lot when I was at that age.
Yeah,
so it's not uncommon.
I bet you weren't seeing it because you were there. I bet you were at every class that you had to
I've
be.
never missed one.
And you were in the library or at home studying.
No, I wasn't doing much studying. I didn't need to.
I
I have a very good memory. I just needed to attend, and that was enough.
I see.
So anyway, it's very common for kids that age to not go to school once in a while,
right.
Or not go to the classes they don't like, or this kind of stuff. So she wasn't uncommon in that.
No,
that
it's the same the world over.
Yeah. So she has a crush on the waiter at the bar. He's called Donado. And during the afternoon, Donado goes into town to run some errands, and Evelyne asks to tag along. Donado accepts. Why not? And they go around town for a while.
It's just puppy love, do you think?
Yes.
Okay.
So during the trip, she decides to tell him how she feels about him. And it's kind of... He doesn't know what to do with it, so They go back to the bar. Exactly. And he explains her as nicely as he can that he's way too old for her. And it couldn't work between them. So she's crushed, obviously, but she understands.
He should have just sung Does Your Mother Know by ABBA. That would have sorted everything out.
I don't know if ABBA was that popular in the late 80s. So.
Probably not, no.
So at the end of the afternoon, her official boyfriend, because she had one,
right.
Salvador.
Designated official boyfriend.
Yes. Meets her at the cafe and then walks her to the bus stop where she can catch the bus that will take her home.
Okay.
And it's about 6 p.m. at that point. The trip takes about 20 minutes or so. And she gets off the bus at the stop in front of the housing estate where she lives with her parents.
Right.
She walks part of the way home with a school friend, Christelle, and then they split up because they live in different houses, so at some street corner they each go their way. But at that point, she's only a few hundred meters from her house.
So really she should be safe.
Yeah. Another school friend living at the intersection where they split, Geraldine, confirms that she saw Evelyne continue towards her house on her own. A few minutes later, she saw her walk back towards the intersection. And a few more minutes later, she saw Evelyne at the back of a small, light-colored car driving away from her parents' house. And she describes Evelyne as sitting at the back of the car on her own with her elbows on the front seat.
So she doesn't exactly look like she's been kidnapped.
No. And the only other occupier of the car is a youngish man, European-looking, fairly muscled, hair fairly short, combed back.
Right.
That's the description she makes. Evelyne is never seen alive again.
That's sad. All that life before her and she's gone.
Yes. The next morning at about 8:45, hunters, it's not dog walkers this time, but hunters, find her body a few kilometers outside town. She's lying on her front with only her skirt and shoes on. The rest of the clothes are on her school bag next to her.
Oh, that's so sad.
She's missing one of her wool gloves, and she's missing an earring.
Okay.
Evelyne has been beaten, raped, strangled, and shot in the head with a .22 long rifle.
God, That's
at
savage.
the base of the skull, like totally execution style
That is savage.
from behind.
To beat someone and then shoot them in the back of the head.
Yes.
You know, why bother beating if you're going to end someone's life? Oh, it's just nasty.
Oh, you can assume that the guy who did it was intending to kill her by beating her, and she just wouldn't die, so he shot her to kill her.
Could be.
That's my guess. But that would mean that he had planned to kill her and have a backup gun, though. So I don't know. The missing earring is found by a neighbor in the street where her parents live a bit later on that day.
Right, so she lost
Which
it
is
before.
weird.
Yeah, she lost it before she got in the car then.
Exactly. She would have lost it before getting in the car, but she doesn't look like she was abducted when she was
No.
seen by Geraldine at the street corner.
No, you tend not to sit forward the way all
Exactly.
kids did when you were in the...
Well, in the 80s,
In
when
the
there were
80s.
no
Yes.
headrests.
Yeah,
Yes.
no
Yeah.
headrests, no seatbelts.
Of course
Well,
not.
why bother?
So, yeah, that is a bit strange. There is some inconsistency there.
Yeah.
According to some of Evelyne's friends, she told them that she had been feeling followed in the street for a while.
All right.
After the autopsy, which is performed on her body the next day, DNA is recovered.
Okay.
It is tested in 1992 and 1998, but there's no match.
Right.
Of course, that was before the national DNA databases in France, because they appeared in the late 90s. I
Right.
think it's the same as, what is it called in the US? Got the name.
CODIS.
CODIS also launched, I think, in the late 90s. It's pretty much the time where all the police forces decided that they needed some
Yes.
global,
Yes.
national databases. So that was just before that.
Mhm.
So, of course, the pool of people listed was probably quite small. It's also before the laws that force the collection of DNA for certain crimes
Yeah.
had been enacted, because that was in the 2000s. That means they were very rarely collecting DNA.
So that rule is the same in France as it is in
In the
most
UK and
other
in the
countries.
US. Yeah. So there's a list of crimes, and I can't remember what they are, but probably
Violent
rape,
ones.
murder, and
Yes.
violent crimes.
From GBH up, probably.
Yeah, something like that.
Mm.
They collect the DNA. But at the time, it didn't happen. So, of course, the number of people that were listed, it was probably a few murderers that were listed in the databases. So, really not
No.
much. So, the chances of matching random DNA
Yeah.
was essentially zero, and it was zero in that case. The DNA profile is added to the national database in 2002.
Mm-hmm.
So, they have a complete profile. And then they collect samples from about 100 men that they knew had some kind of contact with Evelyne at the time.
Right.
The detectives suspect 4 men: Roberto Zucco, Michel Fourniret, that's episode 42, you should know that name,
Yeah, I was thinking.
Luc Tangor, and Émile Louis. They're all serial killers. And they were all in the area at some point.
Oh my God! So it's a bit like
Yes.
Wisconsin.
Yes. The police even requested exhumation of Roberto Zucco's body in Italy, because he died in Italy,
Right.
to check his DNA.
So they're really, really wanting to solve the.
Yes. And
Yeah.
none of those match.
Okay.
So they still don't know who that is.
I mean, I guess given how awfully she died, I mean, it would be some. You're not going to do that once.
You wouldn't think so, no.
No.
Especially when you're prepared, obviously prepared.
Mm.
So the inquiry goes cold after that. There's no lead, no useful witness, no DNA match, nothing.
Right.
The only reason why the case stayed open is that Giselle, that's Evelyne's mum, has launched proceedings after proceedings along the year to stop the murder from being forgotten, and the other crimes around the murder, like rape and GBH and all that, to reach statutes of limitation. So essentially, she's keeping everything in the process by constantly appealing and launching new proceedings. And it works. And she's also helped by 2 instructing judges
Mm-hmm.
over time. There's been 3 judges working on the case, but 2 of them helped her by doing the same thing. So
Yeah.
every time there was a chance that it would fall
Yeah.
under statute of limitation, they would launch something to stop it and start again. And so it stays up and open for 20 years.
I mean, we've seen that in the past that, people have stayed alive, parents have stayed alive, have been pushing for their children or family member to,
Yeah.
to find out what happened to them. So, I mean, and it's sad that people, have to do that.
Yeah, but that's the system. You have statutes of
Yeah.
limitation. So
Yeah.
She even puts flyers all around town, and she ends up on TV in the 90s in one of the crime shows like Stop Crime Watch or whatever it was called in the UK. So she appears on one of those in the 90s. But that goes nowhere. On the 16th of March 2003, a man called Robert Grenet and his brother want to leave the car park at the Pont du Gard. Been there? Pont du Gard? The big Roman bridge?
Oh, yes. Sorry, yes.
So we've been to the car park.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, you have to walk quite a way to get to the Pont du Gard.
Yeah. So they want to leave the car park. The brother has his parking ticket, but Grenet doesn't. He lost his.
Whoops.
I don't know how you do that, but anyway. You walk around, I guess, and you don't pay attention.
Mm.
So there's a gate to leave the car park, and it won't move unless you have paid, and you have the ticket that shows that you have paid. So he wants to explain the problem to parking attendants, but they can't find them. So he and his brother decide that his brother is going to go first, he has the ticket, and Grenet is going to follow very closely so that he can get out before the gate comes down.
Cheeky.
So that's their plan.
So does that mean he doesn't have to pay?
Well, no, he doesn't have a ticket.
Yeah.
That's when the security guards turn up. And there's an altercation between the brothers and the security guard that ends up in a fight. Grenet is arrested. And he's not known by the police services at that point. He goes on trial and is found guilty of what's called in France voluntary violence. And in the UK it would be GBH.
Yeah, or aggravated assault
Yes.
in the US, I guess.
Yes, exactly. And sentenced to 3 months in prison, suspended, and a fine.
But because he's used violence, I'm guessing they're going to take his DNA.
At that point, the law has just changed. And yes, because he committed a violent crime, his DNA is collected.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not next door, but I mean, it's in the same kind of area as...
It's not far, yes.
Yeah.
Avignon is... Well, we've been to Avignon to IKEA, I think, and it's like 30 kilometers from there, if that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not far.
I'm sure everyone in the world would want to rush to Avignon just to go to the IKEA.
Yes.
It's a beautiful city.
Yes.
And the Pont...
yeah,
Pont
the
du
bridge
Gard
is not that nice. There's not much left of it.
The Pont du Gard... Well, I mean, it's...
No, Pont du Gard, yes. Pont d'Avignon, no.
No,
From
but Pont du Gard is amazing. I mean, it's a Roman aqueduct. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful structure.
So for several years he refuses, and he manages not to.
Oh, that's cheeky.
And at some point he runs out of options. So he ends up accepting to have his DNA collected. He has no choice anyway. He's going to be sent to jail if he doesn't.
Yeah.
And that happens in 2005. And his DNA is put in the national database at that point.
I'm feeling a slot machine whirring round. And
yes.
Ching, 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 ding, 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 noise coming.
Yeah. There, once they put it in, they discover that there's a 99.9% match.
Uh-huh.
And it raises an alert, of course, automatically. Grenet's DNA is one that was collected on Evelyne's body in 1987.
Right.
So the inquiry starts.
So, I mean, he's got no connection to this case at all. This is
He wasn't
completely
known
left
to the
of
police
centre.
until that fight.
Right.
He had
not
done anything. He's been under the radar.
Yep.
Nothing so far. But
so
now,
there'd be no reason for his DNA to be on her.
No. So the detectives established that at the time of the murder, Grenet was working as a fireman at the barracks on Rue Carreterie, not far from the high school where Evelyne was going to school.
Right.
One of Evelyne's neighbors is also a fireman, and Grenet's best friend. He was even his witness at his wedding, and it is likely that Grenet spotted Evelyne during one of his visits to his friend's house.
Right.
The detectives show a bunch of photos to Geraldine. Remember the witness?
Yes.
Street corner. One of them is a photo of Grenet from 1987, and she identifies that photo as the one closest to the man driving the car that she saw Evelyne in on that night. On the 16th of June 2006, 19 years after the murder, Grenet is arrested in front of his house. He doesn't resist arrest. The police searches his house and they don't find anything.
Well, no, why would they?
They then take him to the fire station, where he still works, and search his locker there.
Okay.
He apparently found it very funny, and he was joking with his colleagues at the fire station, showing his handcuffs and everything. But again, the search goes nowhere, and he obviously knew.
Yeah.
During the interrogation, Grenet refuses any involvements in the murder. He says that he's never seen Evelyne, never talked to her, never been to her school, never been to the bar where she used to go, never possessed a firearm. There's no way his DNA was found on her body. So unlike a lot of people who are told, oh, we have your DNA and confess, he says, no, that's not possible, you're lying.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, DNA is very circumstantial. Yes, it's scientific. But, I mean, all it proves is you've come in contact with this person.
Yes,
it does not prove guilt at all.
That creates a contradiction because he says he never knew her, never met her, never been around her, and somehow his DNA is on her. So he can't say, oh, there's another reason.
No.
He's saying you made a mistake or you're lying.
Yeah, but it is very telling the way, it's the DNA isn't like the magic bullet that everybody thinks it is.
No. It shows a connection, but it doesn't necessarily show what the connection is. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You could be at somebody's house but not kill them, and they just happen to be killed by someone else the next day, but your DNA is going to be in the house, yes. Look
at the case that we were listening to yesterday where the woman had unknown DNA underneath her fingernails to the two suspects that were in it. And it was the guy who was autopsied just before her. I mean, that's insane.
That was insane, yes. So he says there's no way his DNA was found on her body.
Mm-hmm.
He maintains that on the 8th of December 1987, he was on duty at the fire station and therefore he couldn't have killed her.
Right.
There's, however, no trace of that in the register.
What you mean? From 17 years ago, they can't...
Well, apparently they still have the register.
Wow.
But his lawyer explains that if he handled the phones on that night, because he wasn't on active duty,
right,
he had no reason to sign the register. So if his job on that night was answer the phone and direct people to fires,
right,
then he had no reason to have put his name in the register, and therefore it explains why he could have been working at the fire station,
name wasn't in the
but
register.
Not have his name in the register.
I guess they would keep a register of the people who were leaving the building for just in case one of them doesn't come back.
I have no idea why they have that register. They might want to know who's responsible in case something happens, or I really don't know.
I still think it would be from a body count when you're...
Could be. To make sure that the people going out come back as well.
Exactly.
Maybe. Although it's a very small fire force, so you would know if somebody's missing. It's not like there's hundreds of people.
But presumably the pompiers run kind of like a national...
No,
kind of like,
no. In France, it's voluntary.
Yes, I knew that.
Except in Paris where it's the army.
Okay.
So it's not run like an army operation. It's really, really loose. Remember, Mathieu was a
one of
volunteer?
Our friends. Yeah.
They just go and sometimes they don't. And it's very, very, very loose.
Mathieu would not be able to run into a building now, let me tell you. Never mind.
Anyway, so by 2006, it's impossible to check more about that fire station night.
Right.
Because they have the register, but they have a good explanation why he might not be in it.
Something plausible, yeah.
The detectives also established that it was only in 1988, the next year, that he bought the type of car that Geraldine remembers seeing him in on that night.
Right.
So that's after the murder.
Was she super confident about the make of car, though?
Enough to mention it, but she wasn't exactly sure what car it was. She was sure about the color and the kind of general shape.
Okay, because I mean that's...
So, but
you generally no. I mean, I don't want to seem like I'm kicking women in the face, but they're not really generally known for being kind of petrol heads and knowing what car is what.
Yeah, no, she might not have known exactly what the car was.
Especially if she doesn't drive. She's at school, so I think she could be forgiven for...
Yes, it's also possible that it wasn't his car he was driving.
True.
But we can't establish that either.
Mm-hmm.
So... strangely, though, he seems to be very aware and knowledgeable on other murder cases in the area. So maybe he was an early true crime buff, or maybe he knows too much.
Yes.
He's arrested anyway and sent to jail waiting trial. At that point, he gets friendly with one of the guards, and he tells him that he met Evelyne in a street in front of the fire station one day. He convinced her of a date and a meeting at a car park not far from where her body was found.
Right.
They met there, they had sex, and then he drove her home. He didn't tell any of that to the police when he was interrogated because he heard that she had been murdered and he panicked and he didn't want to be a suspect. So that's what he tells to a prison guard.
Right.
So the instructing judge hears about that,
Yeah.
makes him come to his office, or her office, I think, and starts questioning him.
I mean, nothing makes a suspect look more guilty than changing your story.
Yes, but when he's questioned by the instructing judge, he gives the original version he gave to the police, that he didn't know her, never met her, and knew nothing about her.
So he's a bullshitter.
No mention of meeting her at all. So again, he's sent back to jail. Again, he gets friendly with a guard, and he tells the second version of the story to that guard. That's on the 19th of June 2006. The guy must be an idiot, but anyway. So the guard talks to the judge, obviously. The judge calls him again, questions him again, and again he maintains the first version of the story.
This guy's a giant ass.
I don't know if he's just a complete idiot and has to tell the real story to someone, or if he's just playing with the system. But that's risky.
He's both an arse and an ass.
I don't know. I don't understand what he's doing.
I'm not liking the cut of his jib.
Yes. After, a few days later, again, talking to a guard, third time.
Oh my God.
He says that he met Evelyne and had consensual sex with her. Again, the judge calls him, getting really, really pissed off at that point. And he says, no, I didn't know her. I didn't have anything to do with her. I'm not linked to that murder at all. The guard must have misunderstood what I was saying.
3 times, 3 different guards. How old is she, by the way? She's at school.
She was 16.
Still.
So I don't know what he's playing at. It's just weird. Doing it once, okay. Twice, that's weird. 3 times.
He's a moron.
I don't know. It makes no sense. So the police also discover that Grenet had a violent side, which they didn't know about at the time. For example, once he got in one of his colleagues' room and destroyed the furniture in there because he was pissed off.
Wow.
The police wasn't informed of the fact because he was originally a carpenter and repaired all the damage he did when he was instructed by his superiors to do so.
Oh, right, okay. I thought he did it like a cartoon. He did it really quick before anyone noticed.
No, he was told by his superiors to fix it, and he did, and therefore they didn't report it.
So it wasn't a Warner Brother cartoon? Okay.
No. Also questioning people who worked at Fire Station at the time, the police discovered that Grenet and a few of his colleagues were drinking heavily on duty during the day. Very often. That's
scary.
It's a bit scary, yes. That's what you want when you have a fire in your house.
Exactly.
Drunk firemen turning up. Yeah, but that's
I
the
don't
thing.
want a drunken dude going up a ladder to save a cat if they're going to, fall out the ladder with a cat.
Yes. Also, one of Evelyne's friends eventually reports to the police that despite the fact that Grenet maintains that he didn't know the bar where Evelyne went, he was a regular.
Okay.
He knew him. He had seen him there.
Right.
So some dodgy stuff was clearly going on around Grenet at the time of the murder. On the 6th of July 2006, the police received an anonymous letter. It describes what Grenet and a group of friends did to a woman with learning difficulties. She was called Christiane, aka Cricri, of course.
Uh-huh.
That's normal. At the barracks, at the fire station barracks.
Right.
The police identify who Christiane was, and they get her statement. She says that she met Grenet at the barracks a few times for sex. He was, on these occasions, fairly violent with her, and he also made her have sex with a few of his colleagues, what he watched.
That poor woman.
Another time, they took her to the barracks gymnasium and spanked her until her ass was bright red. Another time, during a summer night, Grenet forced Christiane to leave through a window, and she ended up being stuck on the terrace, naked.
Oh my God.
With bloody legs, apparently, but I found no explanation for why she had bloody legs. It could be when she went out the window or something. I really don't know.
This guy is just...
Yeah, and it was another fireman who let her in via his window from the terrace and gave her some of his clothes because she was naked.
Oh, this lady needs to stay away from...
So Grenet is questioned again, taken out of jail, questioned again.
Yeah.
And he and his colleagues confessed to those facts. But they can't be prosecuted because of statute of limitations.
Oh, that makes my
Because that would have been the 80s, and at that point we were in the 2000s. It's over 20 years, so there's nothing they could do.
Of course.
So the affair goes to trial on the 20th of March 2007.
Right.
And they do a reenactment, but Grenet refuses to take part, so it does nothing useful. Finally, the trial starts on the 7th of April 2008.
That's quite a few years down the road.
Yeah. Well, they needed to find something to charge him with because there is not much apart from DNA, and the DNA doesn't prove he killed her.
No.
so they had to investigate again. Psychiatrists declare him fit for trial, and according to them, he's devoid of mental illness.
I'll tell you what, he's
intelligent.
He's a sadist.
But they say he's a narcissist, egocentric, psycho-rigid, and immature.
And a sadist.
I guess, yes. In other terms, he's a nasty bastard.
Oh, yes.
So during the trial, a DNA expert shows that it is strictly impossible for the DNA found on Evelyne's body to be anyone else's.
Mm-hmm.
Grenade then admits that he had consensual sex, so now he's going to the second story.
Right.
That's not good when you do that on a trial.
Yeah. Story B.
Yeah. But he didn't lie about it, he says. He just didn't remember, because it was one of his many, many, many extramarital affairs. So he just didn't remember her. She was just a woman. Just another notch on his belt. So he didn't remember her, so that's why he didn't say it. He didn't lie. He just didn't say because he didn't remember.
Oh, he's a peach.
On the 10th of April 2008, he's sentenced to life in prison.
Right.
He appeals.
Of course.
The appeal trial starts on the 20th of September 2009, and on the 2nd of October, so 4 days later, that was quick, he's sentenced again to life in prison. He appeals again, and the highest court denies the appeal and sends him back to prison.
And blows a giant raspberry in his face.
He died in prison in January 2023.
Oh, gutted.
So last month.
Oh, gutted. Last month?
Yeah, January.
Damn it. It lasted too long.
And the only reason why that case was solved is because of that fight in 2003 at the Pont de Gare.
Yep.
If that hadn't happened, most likely that's a murder that would never have been solved, and he would have got away with it.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's the story.
Well, sometimes it might be safer to call the Ghostbusters than the fire brigade.